this week, Mr. ExcelJet.net. It's got a nice rhyme to it. It's got a nice flow to it. We have David Bruns with us. Dave, could you tell us a little bit about the history or the story of ExcelJet.net?
Yeah, so ExcelJet.net is a site that I have been working on with my wife, Lisa. And before that, I'd been doing some corporate e-learning training and always had been doing a lot of Excel work, and just got the idea one day that that the world needed like a site that was clean and organized and a place where you could go. Really, it's really made for people that that just want to solve a problem and then get back off the site and finish their job and go home early and spend some time with their family. And so anyway, that was the vision, and been working on it now for about almost 2 years. It'll be 2 years sometime right after Christmas, and got about 4 courses on it and a whole bunch of free videos and a lot of reference material. Like we have a large list of shortcuts and a large list of functions and formulas, and pretty much continue to add content to the site every week. And it's been a much bigger project than I ever envisioned, actually. It's much harder to document Excel than I thought.
It's interesting. Whenever we had Chandu on, one of the things that Chandu said is, he thought about, since he does a lot of training, he thought about instead of, there's only so many functions, right? There's only so many things that you can teach, and at the end of that, then what do you teach? And then, he realized, he had an epiphany, I guess, that it's not just the 1,000 functions, it's the 1,000 functions times the 100 different ways you could use that function, whether that's a job or project management or any sort of discipline. How do you approach this with your training?
Well, can I ask to something that might be before that? Is why do you say that it's hard to document? And then I think Rick's question will nicely tie in.
Yeah, well, it's big, right? Like, I don't know, one of my readers sent me an email not too long ago and said, that they were really making progress and they were super excited, but that they felt like that Excel was like the ocean. And I feel that way sometimes too, and maybe you guys have as well, right? Like, I mean, pretty much every company I worked in, I would have been considered one of the Excel experts, but as I got into it more and really tried to map out how you would cover the whole thing, I was immediately kind of humbled because I realized there was so much about Excel that I didn't know, and that's still the case today. Like, I feel like I learn something every day. And to your point, Oz, I think one of the things is that Excel is like it's a Swiss Army knife tool. It's used by every major vertical out there in a different way, and often sometimes because of legacy, because that's the way they do it, sometimes because they had some hotshot that showed them how to do something really interesting and really cool, sometimes because it's the only way they could figure out how to make something work. It's a very flexible tool, and so, like you say, it can be used in almost any way. And to your point, or to the question about how to handle functions and formulas, like, really, what I've really started to do is I created something I called the Minimalist Guide to Functions, right? I wanted just a single list of functions, and I wanted to see the arguments that they accept clearly, like which ones were required, which ones were optional, and I wanted to see them in one list, and that's on our site right now. It's not complete. I think it's 100-some functions, and of course there's more like 400 functions in Excel. And then I wanted a really brief, concise description of each function. And then I started to build formulas that use the functions, right? And I started to link the formulas back to the functions, because I also wanted to be able to look at, like, let's say you're counting cells, right? And you're counting cells that have negative numbers, or counting cells that are blank, or counting cells that contain a specific text string or something like that. Then I wanted to be able to show all those formulas and the functions that would be used in those formulas typically. Because for me personally, like, when I look at lists of things and I see, like, for example, some product or array formulas, when I see them occur again and again, that kind of helps me understand, like, oh, that's what that's good for. That kind of function works. You'll see that all the time in those type of formulas. And again, I feel like I'm really far away from complete mastery, But I haven't seen any resources that do it quite like that. And because I don't have the resources finished, I can't say that they work that great. But for me, it's helping me learn a lot more about it.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. What analogies would you use? Because you say it is like an ocean, but sometimes I think about it as the handkerchiefs coming out of a magician's sleeve.
Yeah.
So you learn pivot tables exist, and then you start learning those, and then it come out with power pivot and inquiry, and then you find out there is some scenario tool and a camera tool, and the magician just keeps pulling these handkerchiefs out.
Yeah.
But then when you look at the functions, that seems like an ocean full of Lego blocks.
Yeah.
You reassemble them in another way, you got a whole nother ocean.
Yeah.
It just keeps going.
It's funny because you mentioned pivot tables, and a lot of people, that's something that we built a course on, or I did one last year, and in a funny way, and I'm sure you guys have talked about this before, but pivot tables a lot of people, they seem really mystical and complex and exotic. But in a lot of ways, pivot tables are way easier than working with advanced functions because most of the work is done for you. You just have to set up the data and make sure that it's working right, and then you can look at it in 10 different ways without even writing a single function. And it's one of those funny things because you'll see people struggle over, all sorts of sum ifs and count ifs. They could do it in 15 seconds in a pivot table.
Yes. And why do you think that is?
Well, I think those functions are hard to understand. They actually require a much better understanding of Excel. And especially if you start messing around with any kind of array formulas or something like that, like you definitely have to understand in your mind, what those arrays look like and why, when you multiply one times another, why you get some funky result of true-false values and how you might coerce those into zeros and ones and it's not terribly difficult, but the average person's not going to get that for a long time. I know I didn't understand it for a long time.
Right. Right.
So I have a question for you. So jet, what is the jet in Excel jet? Why jet?
Well, honestly, I've got this thing about short names and in brand. I'm not like I have a background in design too, and I just had this idea, looking around on the internet, that a lot of the names that you run into in the world of Excel are kind of generic, and I mean, as it's just normal, right? They're just kind of generic. And Excel kind of looks, all the screenshots look kind of generic. Everything's green, kind of washed out. And I just thought, it would be a lot better if I had a short name that was kind of cryptic, and also I thought reflected the idea of something that was short and concise, and also would help you work faster. But then, visually was memorable too, and simple and orange. One of my sons, who's a really talented artist, always gives me a hard time because he doesn't like that orange. He thinks it looks like a pumpkin or something like that. But I still kind of like it because I don't think people don't use orange as much with Excel. They use green more. So.
Right. So is that kind of like a mantra for you to keep things short and simple? I mean, is that you have a whole list of shortcuts on your website? So is that kind of a guiding philosophy?
I'm a sucker. I'm a total minimalist wannabe, and I can't really say I live that way, but I'm a sucker for the idea of minimalism, and also I really, and you guys I'm sure can appreciate this, but occasionally you'll be trying to solve a problem in Excel that you solved before, and it might be kind of complex, but because you need to do this certain 7 steps, like in a certain order, you can just bang it off in 5 minutes. And the first time you did it, it probably took 4 hours, and you gave up a few times because you got so frustrated. But I feel like it's really interesting, right? Like a carpenter is that way. A carpenter who knows how to build a door frame. Like I couldn't build a door frame, I'm sure. Positive I couldn't do that. But a carpenter could build one because they've done it a bunch of times, right? And so I feel like Excel, like that too, it's got a certain, when you get good at it, you develop skill and you recognize patterns and you repeat those patterns. You're not really doing something nobody's done before. You're doing something exactly the same way. And so I really like that idea. I really like the idea that anybody can learn those patterns and do really sophisticated things without being some crazy mad scientist.
Dave, I tell you, anybody who has a painting like that that you have behind you is not going to have a pale, washed-out green website. It's not going to happen. And I heard something very similar whenever I talked to John Whittawer, Vertex 42.
Yeah.
You think Vertex 42? I mean, where's the Excel name in that, right? And ends up the whole concept of the name was so that it would be so generic to where he could go into pretty much any business that he wanted to. And the 42 was from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah.
Right?
The answer to this question. Yeah.
I was like, oh, I didn't even think about that. So you had it on there. I mean, that was pretty impressive.
Yeah.
So Jordan, Oz, do you guys have any questions around training? 'Cause I know you guys have been training quite a bit.
I've got a question because I was just working on a blog post today, and it's interesting that you're here. How do you respond to a question of, teach me Excel?
Yeah. Well, honestly, I mean, the first course I built is called Core Excel. It's about 130 videos, and I often think of them as, they're all short, they're all like 3 minutes or less, but I think of it as like it's the 130 boring things you need to know before you can go to the next level, and it's all sorts of stuff like how to insert rows and how to insert columns and how to delete rows and columns, right? Like how the grid works, like how you can delete 1,000 rows and Excel doesn't care, right? Excel just replaces those again with another 1,000 rows, and I feel like it's really important to do that basic work. I'm personally pretty impatient when I learn something, and like I'll think, oh yeah, I don't need to know that stuff because I already understand something more advanced. But then often I find that I struggle with something stupid because I didn't pay attention to the beginning stuff, And so I feel like you need to spend some time doing the basic stuff. Not all of it necessarily, but you should spend some time, learning the basic functions, learning the basic idea of formulas and cell references and mixed references. Just understand what those things are, even if you don't need them today. And then I feel like you're in a much better position to build on that later. But it's hard, Oz. I mean, I don't feel like there's an easy answer to that question. The best answer is use it every day, and you'll figure it out.
Now, okay, now I get you there. Because my philosophy has been, what's going to pull somebody's ass out of the fire? And if I do have to show them some nested formula to pull their ass out of the fire to get their Friday afternoons back, because that's what happens. Some vendor sends them this thing, and they know that's what Friday afternoon looks like. So I don't get into automatic column widths. How to, download fonts online and install them to your computer and use them on Excel. So there's a whole lot of things that are there, a whole lot of very fundamental things. But, I don't believe in the beginner, intermediate, advanced teaching, because unless somebody really is trying to master Excel, excuse me, then they need that fundamental, and they need to be doing it every day. Now, I agree with you 100% there.
Yeah, no, I think also too, for a lot of people, Excel is like a tool they don't really get very well, and they don't like it very much. Honestly, a lot of people feel that way, right?
Right.
And then you show them, but then sometimes you show them one way to do something, and really for me, the main thing that will do it for people is if they see Excel actually do a lot of their work for them, they'll pay attention, right? Like that's the power of pivot tables. If you do reports that are similar to pivot tables, and you realize like, wow, I can just knock these things out. And the other thing about pivot tables, right, is if you set up the data right, the result is perfect. You don't need to worry about whether you screwed up the formulas. And so I just think that for people, the light goes on when they see Excel do something. And conditional formatting, I think, is interesting this way too, right? If you want to pick out the top 10 values out of 1,000, conditional formatting can just show them to you in a second. And when people see that kind of stuff, then they realize, like, oh, there's stuff here that I didn't understand. I didn't realize Excel could do that. And you're right. Like, that's what motivates people. And then once they're motivated, I feel like, they can figure a lot of stuff out on their own.
Yeah. So if they get to see it, if they get to taste that pudding,
Yeah.
Yeah. But see, the thing is, we got to train people to ask, can I taste that pudding? That's what's missing. They aren't asking to taste the pudding.
Right. That's actually going to be our new bumper sticker. Ask to taste the pudding, Excel TV logo.
Then on Cafe Press immediately.
Yeah.
I have just one comment to say, because I actually owe Dave a debt of gratitude, because when I first started doing training, I did not do my due diligence and find out whether I'd be training with a Mac, with the folks who, if they had Macs or if they had Windows, or perhaps I thought that I could do it because they had a Mac. So I was doing all these keyboard shortcuts, and I was telling them what to do, and they were inevitably wrong because they're not the same for Macs. So I needed a way to tell them, I'd say, well, on your machine it's this, and so I actually found your site and became an invaluable resource. So you don't really know, you don't really know how you saved me. How you saved my ass, as Oz would say.
That's right.
Pulled my ass out of the fire. That's
Out
it.
of the fire.
The shortcuts
It really shows you. Yeah.
they're popular. People love that. One thing about the course, I should say, that, I built this course, and I should say, to kind of react to what you said, Oz, too, is that I felt like I needed to cover all that boring stuff because I was going to do it right. This is all kind of me thinking, like, I'm going to build this giant pyramid of knowledge, right? And I got to do the first layer first. But I can't say from a business decision that was a good idea, because most people feel like they don't need that. They think, I already know that stuff, And so I'm not sure I would do it that way again. That's one thing. And also, people don't like going through the basics, A lot of people think, I've been using Excel for 10 years. Why would I do some kind of course like that?
Yeah.
Why would you tell me how to save? And
Yeah. But on the shortcut thing, one thing, Jordan, is that it's incredible. It's just incredible how much people pay attention to shortcuts in the world of Excel. And I just get emails almost every day from people about shortcuts and about that resource and being able to use a Mac at home and a PC at work. And people find it incredibly frustrating when they know maybe 30 or 40 shortcuts pretty well, and then 10 of those don't work on the Mac. They just find that just drives them absolutely mad. And so I noticed when I built that, I couldn't find any side-by-side thing, and that's really what I wanted, because I was using both platforms every day. And so but it turned out that a lot of people, that really resonates with a lot of people. They are in hot pursuit of as many shortcuts as they can find.